Hi there. Welcome back to the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's very special episode, we're going to be talking about a little film called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Fantastic. This was a pretty hyped up film. You first introduced this to me. You were coming down for a visit a few months ago. This is kind of at the end of March. And we missed the theatrical release by about a week. I think it was a limited release, was not available in our local market, and then it released about a week later in theaters. But this movie got a lot of hype. We watched the trailer. The trailer was incredible. I was like, I'm definitely going to see this. And it took quite a while to finally check it out. At the time of recording, I think both of us watched it for the first time last night. And it's pretty epic. It was a fairly significant film. Obviously 2022, directed by Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan.
The Daniels.
The Daniels, and it looks like they've worked together a few times based on their limited filmography or looking at it on Letterboxd. Starring Michelle Yeoh, who is absolutely fantastic in so much of the content she does, and she really shines out here.
As always, she does a bang-up job.
All right. Ki Hoi Kwan, Stephanie Hsu, James Hong, and Jamie Lee Curtis. Stellar cast. People are doing fantastic things here.
Yeah,
man. How did this movie fall onto your radar all those months ago?
Well, this was one, like, we follow different websites, obviously, and we go to different kind of online groups, mostly on Reddit, but yeah, just in kind of reading online about upcoming films. This one caught my eye. Just the description and the people involved, obviously the talent involved, I should say, and the concept. And then I saw that trailer first, and I knew that I had an inkling. I didn't know for sure, because like I don't want to go back and say, I called this because I'm super. But I had an inkling that this was going to be something a little bit more special. Not a little bit more special. I think I had an inkling there was going to be a special film, something a little bit off the beaten path. Something that we necessarily haven't seen before, even though we, like the whole idea of the multiverse and parallel universes, it's a little bit more prevalent, like in the MCU has been toying with it recently. I think in the recent Star Trek series and Star Trek Discovery, I think there's a whole, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard, I'm reading online, there's a whole big storyline about parallel universes. Again, Michelle Yeoh is actually in Discovery as well. She's the parallel universe queen, apparently.
Oh, yes. The mirror universe in the Star Trek world.
Yeah. And then looking at that cast, I was really pumped, and I really had my fingers crossed this was going to be awesome. So I was really, really stoked to see this.
Yeah, I was honestly a bit surprised. I mean, we watched the trailer and I'm thinking, looks really good. And I was really surprised seeing some of the discourse and comments online. So much positivity. Like, it got every cinephile excited. And I think it's kind of right up our alley, where it's a pretty original film. They're doing a lot of interesting things. This is a big mashup of different genres and different topics, executed so perfectly. It was just really, really fun to see everyone enjoying this movie. And right now, just looking at Letterboxd, the average rating is sitting at 4.5. That's out of 361,000 viewings on the platform. Obviously that's massive. And I'm just seeing a huge spike in the 5-star ratings on this.
Well, I'm so happy reading articles, that this has picked up steam. This movie's picked up steam, that it's exceeded all expectations in terms of box office return. I think, especially in the face of, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, the latest MCU flick that came out, also dealing with the multiverse. So to have these kind of two, like the smaller, really indie film or, low budget film come out against like a, blockbuster juggernaut, kind of taking on the same kind of subject matter, or the same kind of, sci-fi kind of conceit. And then to see this indie film that I think you and I were both kind of pulling for, to see this kind of original content, kind of seeing that kind of success, even in the face of bigger blockbuster films dealing with that same subject matter. I think it's been a real kind of feel-good story, not just for the filmmakers and the people involved, but just for the film community. This feels like a real kind of win for everybody, for the audience and filmmakers alike.
Yeah, it's the kind of movie everybody really needs right now after a couple tumultuous years
Yeah.
of pandemic and theater hesitancy. It's like, yeah, this is a really good piece of cinema to go out and see and support.
Yeah, I think in terms of subject matter too, I think there's a real kind of we'll get into spoilers and the plot in a couple minutes here, but in terms of just like how cathartic this movie was, dealing with the relationships of the characters and the kind of that ending there in terms of historically where it's being released in terms of its point in history. I think it's
Hmm.
that needed sense of catharsis, and kind of for me it was like, this uplifting kind of ending, right?
So, an aging Chinese immigrant is swept up in an insane adventure where she alone can save what's important to her by connecting with the lives she could have led in other universes. Well, what is the high level? Like, what is this movie about, right?
It's
Obviously, it's
about
about the multiverse.
it's about a couple who are going to do their taxes, trying to file a tax return. That's what the movie's about.
I love I love the foundation is just a very very simple thing. I mean the in that description, the aging Chinese immigrant is Michelle Yeoh and her husband. So that's Evelyn and Waymond.
Naaman, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're basically this couple who own a laundromat. They live upstairs. They have Evelyn has all sorts of ideas for different sort of business ventures and different things that she kind of wants to get into, like a lot of almost different hobbies, but ways she can kind of enhance the business.
Right. So the movie starts off. The laundromat is obviously in financial straits, and they've been called in by the IRS for another audit. I think they said that they've been targeted before for audits, and they feel that they're being targeted because they're dealing with the same IRS agent. But when they go to file
Yeah.
their returns, I think the IRS agent played by Jamie Lee Curtis is
Yep.
Deirdre Bobeirdre. It's like,
The name, there's a lot of fun names in this
yeah,
movie.
but it's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Again, phenomenal job. Jamie Lee Curtis is always awesome. I think anybody born of a certain age, I think she's probably been a movie crush. Seeing her in True Lies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But yeah, she's asking Evelyn about, like, why did you expense like a karaoke machine?
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, how's that a business expense? And then she's trying to explain it away, and then she's talking about like, and her husband, I think Wayman, is talking about like, oh, she wanted to be something to do with being a novelist, and something like all these other hobbies that she's talking about that were kind of that she had filed under business expenses, but were technically, like Deirdre was saying, is like, this is technically fraud you're
Yeah.
committing here. Like, you're lucky I don't report you right away. But you get the sense right away that she has something relatable, where she's like, I think like middle aged, I guess. She's fallen into this rut, and she's had like obviously these hopes and these dreams and these aspirations, and it hasn't necessarily worked out for her in the way she's planned, and it feels like she's in this kind of rut. I think that's a pretty relatable sentiment for those of us who are in middle age or approaching middle age.
Without a doubt. And I just want to say, let's go into full spoilers right from the beginning here
Yeah.
as we talk about it. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, just go out and check it out right now and then
Yeah,
come
don't-
back.
this is one of those
Just-
movies,
just
like,
list.
Don't let us spoil the movie for you. You should go out your first viewing. I would recommend seeing it fresh.
Yeah.
Without knowing what the plot is, or knowing any of the specifics about what's going on. Go see the movie first. This is the only time I'll say this. Turn this podcast off. Go watch this movie.
That's pretty fair. So it doesn't take long before Evelyn is literally traveling through the multiverse. How did you feel about the way they go through the multiverse? Because it's not really, I thought it was really neat because it's not really them physically going from one universe to another. It's like almost like a state of mind where they can pull in elements from their other selves in the other universes.
I like how it wasn't perfectly defined, because they do go, there is some exposition kind of explaining how it works, where you're the verse jumping, where you're kind of like almost sharing a consciousness of another version of yourself, so that to the point where you can kind of call on their skills and their memories to help you out. So for Michelle Yeoh, obviously she has a martial arts background, and so for her character Evelyn in the movie, it makes sense, like also it makes sense in the context of the movie where there's a bunch of bad guys and thugs after them where she has to fight them
Yeah.
off. But she's like, she'll connect with somebody from another universe who has martial arts training, call on those skills and those abilities and like channel them, even though she hasn't, that version of herself hasn't studied martial arts. She can still call on those skills from another version of herself that has channeled them. But then later on in the movie, other characters are literally pulling in physical, like with their costumes and other items, they're physically pulling them into the universe. So I think it depends on maybe power levels and how you're actually doing it. But I love how they didn't spend too much time on it, and they didn't feel the need to explain it too much. They explained it enough that you understood what was going on,
Yeah,
and that you could kind of
exactly.
extrapolate or fill in the blanks, and interpret it however you wanted, going forward. Because it wasn't like bringing over a bunch of stuff. There were some interesting fights, which we'll get into in a second, I'm sure. But yeah, I thought it was really, really smart, a kind of clever way to do things, and I think there's an echo of that in or something similar in Multiverse of Madness as well. I think they called it dream walking.
Hmm.
So there, I think
Yes.
this is something that's not necessarily unique or original, but the way it's implemented, I think, is unique and original.
Without a doubt. And I do like, as you said, it kind of depends on the individual, how much power, if you can call it power, like how much almost understanding they have of what they're doing. And there's one function where I can't remember the name of it, but they have to do something like statistically improbable in order to connect to their other consciousness in another universe, which kind of starts out really horribly, where her husband has to paper cut between each of his fingers in order to connect to like the universe copy that he wants to get
weird
some skills from.
Because there's like what they label themselves the Alpha universe. So her husband Waymond, who's kind of it starts off because it's from Evelyn's perspective. So Waymond seems like this kind of like he's a nice guy, but he's not like the big tough guy who goes into fights. He's a quiet guy who'll talk to people and not super confrontational. And I think like she's like sees him as kind of almost like weak, right? And not like super confident, not what you just not all these kind of characteristically kind of what we associate like all these kind of hyper masculine kind of traits, right? Of being like super confident and super aggressive. But then all of a sudden she's getting help. So there's a Waymond from another universe that kind of jumps into his body. They can call on other people's experience, but they can also like kind of jump into the bodies and like almost like replace, like supplant the consciousness for a little bit. Again, it's another kind of way they jump in. But he's telling her essentially how this works is like they have this technology where they kind of like mapped out kind of the different possibilities and different realities. And they'll map out, oh, look, this Evelyn over here is a martial artist, but in order to get to that, we need to do like play with probability and odds. And so you need to do something like really improbable to kind of branch out in the way that you need to get to that specific branch. That one you mentioned was like getting paper cuts in between all three fingers. And it's funny as it's a Kiwei Kwan, and he's like, nobody can get a paper cut on purpose as he's trying to like cut his there's these little moments of humor.
There's a lot of humor in the movie, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it, but it's the movie was funny. It had me laughing out loud. There's a lot of good stuff.
Very
and
absurd,
the movie,
right? Absurdist kind of humor.
Yeah. And the movie was told in 3 parts. The first part being everything, and then the second one is everywhere, and the third part is all at once. And really, a lot of the humor was front loaded in that everything part, which is really the first hour of the movie, which is the big setup. There's a lot of emotional payoff in the second part of everywhere, and then all at once is kind of this nice. Or was all the emotional stuff, like especially between the mom and daughter, happening in the third part there?
Yeah, so it's I know I joked about the plot of the movie. Well, not really joked, because it really is about a couple getting audited for their taxes, but it's primarily about one of the core drivers is essentially Evelyn's relationship with her daughter Joy. Joy, who is played by Stephanie Hsu, who is fantastic. When she first came on playing the daughter, I was like, okay, she's okay. The part didn't seem super exciting, but then it turns out that her daughter is actually the Joy from another dimension, the alpha dimension or the alpha universe, is actually the villain of the movie. And when that Joy comes in and she's allowed to kind of play with the character, oh my God, she does such an amazing job.
Yeah, so to give some maybe context there, Vat Joy is known as Jobu Tupaki.
How do you say it again?
Jobu Tupaki?
Jobu Tupaki.
Yeah, I think maybe. But I think they refer to as Jobu quite a bit. In any event, this Joy understands the multiverse, and she's kind of able to jump between universes on her own without having to do any of the probabilities and stuff. And so she's kind of like established that she's gone through a lot of the multiverse, a lot of different universes, acquired a lot of skills, and she's like bending reality in this universe, which doesn't even seem like something should be able to do, but she has such a huge understanding, and that's what I want to call it. Instead of saying it's power, it's like she has a huge understanding of how to coalesce everything into what she wants, and what, like, she understands what's going on.
Just understanding, because in that alpha universe, Wayman explains that Evelyn and Wayman are essentially scientists. And they were the ones doing the research, leading the teams doing the research on multiversal theory. They theorized that there were multiverses, and then they set out to try and figure out how to contact them, right? And that brain interface where you interface with other versions of yourself, like through your consciousness. They said like most people couldn't handle it cognitively, and they pushed them too far and they would break. But there was one person who actually could handle that much stress.
Yeah.
Turned out to be Joy, their daughter. But what happened was, not that she had just had access to every universe, but that there was a point that came where she was essentially forced. She literally she was forced to experience everything everywhere all at once, where she's not just seeing into other universes, she's simultaneously experiencing every infinite universe simultaneously. And she's
it's the title of the movie, right? She's experiencing everything everywhere all at once, right?
That reality where she's simultaneously experiencing everything everywhere all at once, and that kind of breaks her mind, where she can't handle that, and she turns to this idea that because all possibilities happen, everything we do is meaningless. And so she falls into this state of, I guess, nihilism, right? Where like nothing really matters, because if somebody dies here, they're alive over here. If somebody's alive here, they're dead over here. So your actions literally have no consequence from her point of view, because she's experiencing it. So like she can't experience any joy without experiencing the exact same opposite amount of pain at the same time, because infinite universes, there's infinite pleasure, but there's also infinite happiness, also infinite pain and suffering as well, right? So she's in this, when she explains it like that, this kind of state of mind that she's kind of forced to live in, is like, it's a really, really horrifying thought experiment when you actually stop to think about it, right?
No, for sure. And I mean, it's pretty clear, like later on in the movie, she's basically trying to end herself. Like she's trying to destroy herself, because the first part.
And Brian, how is she trying to destroy herself? What's her tool of destruction?
Yeah. So the first part of the movie, you sort of set up with she's the antagonist, right? She's coming in. She wants to kill her mom. She wants to kill Evelyn. And she's basically wanting to do this through the everything bagel. So it's something that Joy has created, which is kind of, I mean, just for me, was just kind of a black hole of sorts, right?
Yeah, it was a great, one of the greatest cinematic puns of all time. The everything bagel, where she put like everything in the universe, her hopes and dreams and all these expectations and like literally everything in the universe she put on this bagel. It created essentially like a multiversal black hole that would theoretically destroy everything, including a multiversal being like Joy.
Yeah. Exactly. And then we find out in the second part and the third that really she is just so depressed and living through all these realities all at once that she was out there. She's not trying to kill her mother. She's trying to find out if maybe, I don't think they explicitly say it, but it's like maybe it's kind of a genetic thing where you can kind of get into that consciousness of knowing all the different universes all at once and like experiencing them, which her mother does eventually achieve. And that's Joy's motivation, is to make sure that she can find someone else to have that experience with, but she still ultimately wants to destroy herself. Like it's kind of is it like a suicidal thing here?
There's a couple of things, and they mention this in the movie. So at the beginning, when she's jumping from kind of verse to verse, universe to universe, and she finds these Evelyns and she's killing Evelyns, essentially killing different versions of her mother. She's looking for a version of her mother that can essentially kind of withstand that kind of cognitive strain and become like her, become like kind of omniscient across all multiverses. Because I think at one point she says she's looking to see if her mother can cross that threshold with her and become a being like her. And then also once she's crossed that threshold, she says, I was hoping that you could, like, find a way to help me make meaning of this, like bring meaning back into my life. Can you talk me out of this? Because we think like, because like the team from the Alpha universe, like, she's building something and we think it's going to destroy like this weapon of mass destruction. But really she built the everything bagel to end her own life because she can't deal with that sense of meaninglessness. And that constant, like, she's in a state of nihilism where like nothing matters. Literally nothing matters, because like if she kills this person here, they're alive in infinite other universes. So like death becomes meaningless. Everything becomes meaningless to her. So I thought it was like a nice reversal where it wasn't about saving the universe or saving the multiverse. It was just like the stakes were personal and they were emotional, and Joy just like, well, if my mom or somebody else, or specifically her mom, because it was a relationship between her and her mom. So it was like, if my mom, who who have that bond with, and she crosses over and she's looking at things from the same perspective as I am, and she can't help me find meaning, then there's no hope, and I'm gonna end my own life or end my own existence. I don't know if life applies. Like she's beyond life and death, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I really enjoyed the explanation of how the EV's universes are created. We've kind of alluded to it earlier, where it really is like a big decision tree. Every decision basically ends up in a new universe being created, with either one of those outcomes being part of that new universe. That is like, it was really well. I love the part where she's going to refile her taxes and she has a slip of paper. It's a receipt. And she has to decide, is this going in that pile or that pile over there? Like pile A or B. And when she puts it down in the middle, it's like, it cracks the screen, and we have like a third universe being created where that decision point had 3 different outcomes to it. I really like that. And then seeing from that Alphaverse that they have a lot of this stuff mapped out with computers and screens, it looked exactly like this game we've been playing recently, Detroit Become Human, where at the end of a chapter you have this decision tree where you made a decision and it branches out into all these other elements that happen because of that, and maybe they come back together. But I really like that part where it's kind of a video game at that point, right? It was really neat.
There's some definitely some like video game style visuals to help explain everything. Yeah, and I thought it was great too, like, in terms of like visuals, in terms of going to these different universes. I know I was kind of wondering how you do this, but I think they did an amazing job. And in terms of like using their imagination to imagine what these different universes might look like, and really like taking full advantage of like there was the hot dog fingers universe, which played actually a bigger role than I imagined.
Well, because there are different montages where they go through, like they're rifling through dozens of universes. We get like a half-second glimpse of each one, but they really focused on the hot dog fingers. It was really quite touching as well.
There's one that, because in that one I think that Evelyn and Deirdre were actually in a relationship together.
That's right.
Like they were, like. So it was weird to see, like, in one they're antagonists, another one like they're actually like they're lovers, and it's an infinite universes, infinite possibilities. I also love too, they took the time in the hot dog fingers universe to show like a 2001 like Space Odyssey kind of version of like how that evolution took place.
There's like the 2 different types of apes. There's apes with fingers that we recognize, and apes with hot dog fingers. And the hot dog finger ones are killing the other ones, and
they use them as like as bigger like as weapons and like to club their enemies to death, and that's how the evolutionary difference started, right? It's like
there's a lot of visual sight gags.
Or like there was the raccoon Tui
That one was completely wild. Apparently, that was actually the raccoon was voiced by Randy Newman. I think I don't know if I just read that in
Really?
Wikipedia or IMDb trivia, but it was definitely a callback to the Pixar
Yeah, Ratatouille. Because
Ratatouille.
like Evelyn gets the name wrong. She's like, like at one point she's like, yeah, Wayman keeps getting possessed. Like that movie, like a raccoon, like Raccoon Tooie. It's instead of
And then Wayman
Ratatouille.
says, "I love that movie. Like that movie is out there, right?"
Yeah, there's also it's kind of cool. It's like at one point it's like we're looking at the scene and then it pulls back to see it's like, oh, this is actually a movie in another universe. And like
Yeah,
that Evelyn was a movie star, martial arts movie star, and she actually starred in the film. But they were watching the film alongside us. Because at one point it's like, oh, the credits start rolling like 3/4 through the runtime.
yeah,
It's like, oh, it pulls back. It's like there's people in the movie watching this version of the movie, but it ends like half an hour sooner than our version in our universe.
yeah,
What else is there? There's one where they're pinatas.
yeah.
There's one where they're like cartoon drawings on a screen, like scribbles, like crayon scribbles. There's one where it's like it's almost like they're living in an old like 70s martial arts movie, and she got like the super strong pinky fingers. There's
Yes,
like the pinky
yes,
finger fight.
yeah.
There's the Rock universe, which comes into play later. We got to bring that one up again. What else is there? There's the BDSM universe where she's like a madam, and she's got the
Oh yes, yeah,
which also comes in it's funny, like all these little snippets come into play with one where she's a cook, a chef, one where she's a singer. Like they flash through a bunch that we don't ever really get to see a whole lot of, but like
yeah. There were a few that were definitely the focus and the most relevant, but it was really
rightfully
fun
so.
being able to flash through and see all the different possibilities. It wasn't like each one isn't just a tiny variation. There are ones that are like wildly different.
I saw ones where like, yeah, I think flashes there were like one where like she was like an alien, and I think there were
Yes.
it's one of those ones you got to go through and kind of pause it and see some of this. There was so
Yeah.
much attention and so much care paid. Comparing it again to like Multiverse of Madness, the new Doctor Strange movie, where I think they went to like two other universes, and it's like on a budget of like 200 million versus whatever this one was. What was everything everywhere all at once, like 20 million or something?
I didn't even look up the budget. It's probably not too big. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, but like the creativity and inventiveness and the number of universes that they went to was even a lot bigger. Just goes to show that like having a bigger budget doesn't necessarily mean if you don't have like the kind of ideas and the drive and the creativity to match that's what counts. Like your budget is a small part of what you can actually achieve, right? Like they did so much with comparatively little. I don't want to say like millions of dollars. It always sounds weird talking about.
Yeah. Well,
It's
$25
like
million
$25 million
dollars
is
a lot of
nothing.
money.
It's like I'm never gonna see. I don't think I'll make that in my entire lifetime, right? So
One of the big things of this movie that touches on, but I think is the most relatable for everybody, is are those decisions and thinking about what could have been had you made that decision, right? And there is a certain amount of people getting hung up on different regrets and recognizing major decision points. And that's sort of told in this movie through the universe where she's a kung fu movie star, right? Because that decision point was her and her husband, or her future husband, going on a first date, and she decides in that universe to leave the car and leave him behind. Where our universe, the main one, she stays in the car and has the life that we've been seeing in the movie. But she's basically got a taste of, if she had left that vehicle and never married her husband, she would have been this huge movie star, like this world-renowned actress and kung fu fighter. I mean, obviously, like for myself, this movie is making me think about all these different decisions, even some small ones that could have these far-ranging effects on my life. Like, did you get a lot of that out of this movie as well? Like, did you start thinking immediately after this movie rolled? It's just like, I wonder what other versions there are of me out there. Did I make the right decisions?
what do you mean after the movie rolled? I think about that all the time. I think I mean I can't be the only one
No.
who's done this thought experiment, right? Is like going back to like, oh, if I had done this instead of that, how might my life have turned out? It's impossible to tell, but I think one of the reasons this movie is so relatable is it's because this is probably a thought experiment that a lot of us have played out in our minds, and it speaks to something about the core of the human condition, about that wondering about our place, wondering about, did I make the right choice? Do my choices matter? And I think that's pretty fundamental to, you know, what it means to be human, like wondering about our place in the world, in the universe, potentially in the multiverse. So yeah, I think that's one of the explanations as to why this movie is striking a chord with people, right? That idea
Definitely.
of free will and agency is always, it's an ongoing kind of debate, ongoing philosophical examination of our condition here. So yeah, absolutely. I think that combined with a couple other things going on, right? The big thing is the relationship between Evelyn and her family. There's between her and her husband, Waymond, there's stress on that relationship because in several universes, Waymond is filing for divorce. The way he explains it, he doesn't actually want to get divorced, but he's like, he can't get Evelyn's attention. Like the relationship is kind of falling apart.
He's using it as a catalyst to start the conversation about the relationship.
Yeah. And in some universes, she signs the papers and accepts it.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, she doesn't understand, or she doesn't understand what's going on. Really, they don't have the conversation because they're in the midst of a multi-universal battle for survival. So there's that going on. Part of that is because her and Waymond have that history together. It's a good way, like narratively, philosophically, to see like, oh, if they had never gotten together, or if they had, if they had done this and taken a different choice in life, and so like they have that history together. But I think the really core relationship is between Evelyn and Joy. So Evelyn and her daughter, because like obviously like was it the Jabberwocky? What's her name? Jabu? I don't know. Jabu. I'm thinking of like the
Jobu
Tapaki. Jobu Tapaki. Yeah. So like at the beginning, you see there's a kind of a bit of a strained relationship where Joy is with her girlfriend Becky, and you can tell that Evelyn is a little uncomfortable with her daughter being a lesbian. She tries to play it off and use an excuse like, oh, your grandfather's coming to visit and he's from another generation, so he wouldn't understand, because eventually she introduces Becky as Joy's good friend, quote unquote.
Yeah. It's interesting because Joy doesn't know enough of their native language to say that to herself. Like she's searching for the word, right? Mm-hmm. Girlfriend, to tell her grandfather. So Evelyn steps in and just says, a good friend. I mean, it's translated on subtitles for us.
Yeah.
But Joy understands enough to say, oh, she's denying that this is my girlfriend. And I think that comes into play later on where the grandfather finds out, like, if Evelyn tells her properly, and the grandfather's like, oh, okay, like he is accepting of it. Like we find out, minutes later, he's just like, girlfriend, okay. Like he moves on with it. Yeah. So it's a lot of that expectations of what we think our family and other people will have on others, and those preconceived like prejudices can come through to our own prejudices.
Yeah. Right? The kind of rationalization that goes on is like, oh, I think this person's prejudiced, so I'm going to reinforce that. But like, even though like you're making an assumption based on, in this case, their age, their generation, that they're going to not be comfortable with, a homosexual relationship. Whereas like that's your expectation of that person based on your own biases, and see that almost like a bias feedback loop, right? Cognitive bias feedback loop. But also it's like this strange relationship where Evelyn is commenting on Joy's weight. It's like, you got to eat better. You're putting on weight. You never call anymore. Like, all this stuff. Like, I think she got a tattoo, and she knows that Evelyn hates tattoos. Yeah. So there's all this stuff kind of going on between, like, there's tension between kind of the mother and daughter. Nothing kind of that's going to break their relationship entirely, but it's just like this ongoing tension that really is this ongoing tension in the relationship. And that relationship is really smartly the emotional core of the movie and what keeps everything focused. And then I think we've touched on it as well, this generational story there's the grandfather and the mother and the daughter. And I think in one of the flashbacks to one of the universes, it touches on this, because there's another component of this as well, where Evelyn kind of sees her own birth, and the doctor says to her father, oh, sorry, it's a girl.
Hmm.
And so it's like this idea that Evelyn, I think from the beginning, felt that, oh, she was constantly trying to live up to her father's expectations and feeling like she never quite hit them, because like she was like trying to get, at the beginning of the movie, she was trying to get the laundromat all like ready and like fixed up and like
Yeah.
paint over the little holes in the wall and stuff, and like ready for like because he was coming visiting from China, and like
Hmm.
she really wanted to show off for her dad that she had done something, but she constantly felt like she was disappointing her father. But then it turned out that she was putting those same kind of pressures in a different way on her own daughter,
Yeah.
and that her daughter felt that she was not living up to her mother's expectations, and that kind of unintentionally she was perpetuating that kind of strain on a relationship, right?
Yeah. She says, yeah, she even says at one point, like, I'm not raising you like my father raised me, right? But she basically is through different methods.
Different way, and this also ties
Yeah.
into it didn't occur to me at the very beginning, but then watching it, because there was all Asian actors or Asian American actors in this, a story focusing on an Asian American family.
Hmm.
And it really is, I think, in reading things online, reading people's interpretations online and seeing different videos online about how the movie is it's kind of an immigrant story, right? Or speaking to
Oh,
the
for
immigrant
sure.
experience, right?
Yeah.
Where like you touched on it too, like the idea of like Joy is trying to talk to her grandfather, but her Chinese is not that great because she doesn't practice that often.
Hmm.
So that and language is so
And even Evelyn is trying to talk to the IRS agent there,
in
and
English.
she's using the IRS agent is using words that are like too complicated for her, right? Like she needs
Yeah, she thought.
Joy's translation there in reverse
Yeah,
to like solve these other very significant issues. They're both significant issues. This family relationship, the daughter and the grandfather, the daughter and the mother, and then their actual problems with all this tax, all these tax issues is a very real financial issue. That's basically the family's livelihood.
yeah, but I think it speaks to the idea of language, speaks to questions of identity, and how do you identify, like if you're an immigrant and you're coming over to a culture, like how do you simultaneously kind of maintain that culture that's important from you, from the
Hmm.
country that you came from, while also kind of integrating into this new culture and society without kind of compromising your family's traditions, but while still, integrating with this new culture. I
Yeah.
think that's there's a tension there that as somebody, I'm not an immigrant. I've never emigrated to anywhere, so I haven't had to go through that experience. But there's a real tension there, and there's real kind of the challenges there, not just the practical challenges of like, yeah, you got to start a business and you got to make money in a completely new country that you
Hmm.
might not even speak the language entirely, or you might have miscommunication issues. But just that idea of how do I maintain my culture? How do I maintain my culture and identity? What are my culture and identity, right? And it's almost
Yeah.
like a hybrid identity or hybrid culture. Whenever you're talking about like the immigrant experience, so I thought for me that was really an interesting perspective that I wouldn't necessarily have considered before. But it was, and that's what I love about this movie is that, yeah, on the surface it's this fun, quirky
Yeah.
ride through the multiverse, but then it's dealing with these very real, very poignant, very meaningful real world issues, relationships between mother and daughter, relationships between across generations, and the immigrant experience, and all these different
Yeah.
things coming into play. And it's like there's so many layers and so much depth to the movie, right?
Well, that's the thing, and the depth, the layers, they're executed so well that they're not necessarily subtle. They don't need to be subtle, but they're not shrouded. Like they're not too complicated. Like they're there for everybody to pick up, and that's where the execution, like the script, the directing, the acting, everything in this is just executed perfectly for such I think a wide audience that can attach themselves to a great number of things. And if you can't attach to something directly, like there's a lot of stuff on the relationship mother and daughter. I mean, we can't. I personally identify with a lot of that stuff, but we can completely understand the perspective we're being conveyed all the elements here to make sense of what's happening and really respect what the movie is doing and what it's saying, I think.
Well, I think even for me and like thinking about my kids, like they not obviously not mother daughter, but like, like I
Mhm.
have a son and a daughter. So just even that parent sibling kind of relationship. And then that I was looking at it from that perspective as well, right? So that whole ending in the movie where, you know, Evelyn in it was like it wasn't our universe. It was like a slightly different universe where there was a Chinese New Year party because at the beginning of the movie she was inviting people to the party there for was it birthday party or Chinese New Year? I can't remember what it was, but it was some party they were inviting all their customers and stuff to.
Mhm.
And then she has her kind of confrontation with her daughter Joy outside, and she's like learning is like, oh, you got to let me go, mom. Like you can't. This relationship is toxic, and like I can't move ahead like this. You don't know what it's like being your daughter. Like
Mhm.
I can't live like this anymore. It's like beyond the whole like the multiversal omniscience thing was essentially this metaphor where she was looking for this relationship with her mother, this perfect ideal relationship that just doesn't exist, or it does exist, but it's balanced out by, infinite terrible relationships as well. And she's like, you got to learn to let me go because she's still fighting. Because at the end climax there, when Joy's trying to jump into the everything bagel black hole thing, and like everyone's holding on to her. And there's this great visual where her dad, Evelyn's dad, and holding on to her, and then Wayman's holding. So it's like this generational thing. It was
Yeah.
like all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're kind of
Yeah.
aligned now in purpose. And Joy's like, you got to let me go, and Evelyn's like, okay, I'll let you go. Like I'll. It's like in the one universe, like Joy's gonna get in her car and she's gonna leave and go on like start her own life theoretically, and then the other one's like Joy's jumping in the black hole, the everything bagel, and then before she pulls off, Evelyn runs back up to her and is like, "No, you know what? You do need to lose some weight. You only come around and call when you need something from me. You never."
Mhm.
And she goes like, "There's two sides to this story, and I'm not going to let you go completely. I'm going to let you go live your life, but I'm not going to let go of you. I'm not going to give up on this relationship."
Yeah.
And so it's like it's not about holding on to people, keeping them close, or letting them go and finding their independence. It's about kind of finding that balance. I think the whole movie you're going through is like finding that balance of between, in this case, hanging on and letting go. But in the end, Joy decides not to enter that enter into oblivion there. But it's a really
Yeah.
emotional scene too. Like in the Rock universe, I think Joy jumps off the edge of a cliff as a rock.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they're in that universe, they're rocks and they're kind of like wiggling along. And then Evelyn jumps after her, but he has a pretty emotional kind of scene there. I know
Definitely.
I was getting choked up a bit at the end there. As they were going through in this relationship,
Oh, for
they were
sure.
laying their cards on the table between like, like they were seeing things from both perspectives, from the parent and the child, and seeing that I'm sure like, and they're looking at it both as a parent and as a child, and seeing, parallels in my own relationships. It's like, yeah, it's pretty touching, right?
One of the big things I took away from the movie as well is maybe more of a cultural, like a modern cultural thing here, where the first half of the movie is there's a lot of fighting, right? And there's sort of like the multiverse agents coming through, inhabiting bodies, and they got to fight each other. And at the end, there's this huge crew of people that Joy has gathered to kind of like prevent Evelyn from coming up the stairs to stop her from jumping into the
No, it
bagel.
was actually it was actually the Alpha team from the Alpha universe, and they
Yes.
wanted Joy to destroy herself, and so they were trying to, and
Oh, that's right.
everyone was like, "No, I'm going to save my daughter," and they were like, "No, she's a threat to everybody,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and we're going
That's
to
right.
stop you from stopping her." So it's like she didn't really have agents, but yeah, other than that,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that is right. And she basically determines that the best way of sort of dispatching of these agents is finding out why they hurt. If I could steal that term, because I think I saw it online, and it's just really because it sums it up perfectly. It's trying to find what makes somebody happy, like what's bothering them, what will fix that possible problem, on why they are acting in the way they are. Like, why are they really trying to stop her? Like, why are they violent? Why are they doing this or why are they doing that? Like the Ratatouille guy with a raccoon on
The
his head.
raccoon Tui.
Like, he's basically blaming Evelyn for having the raccoon taken away by animal control. And so Evelyn is able to go to his universe and help him chase after the
But
raccoon from him. I mean, the scene plays out
that's
hilariously,
amazing.
but it's so impactful. It was just like,
She gets on his shoulders and just like in
yeah,
the movie Ratatouille or in this week's Raccoon 2, and she's like pulling on his hair to control him and
yeah,
making
yeah.
him run down the street.
Like I have never seen the actual movie Ratatouille. I'm not sure if that's how it works. I didn't realize there's like some psychic connection between these, but yeah. In any event, she basically is able to pacify all these agents on the stairs because she's actively helping people, and I think that's something that our society right now is not able to do. They're not able to comprehend. They're
Well,
not. People just want to attack one another
yeah, I
constantly.
like that this is one of the reasons that I love this movie is that it preached an alternative to violence, where violence in this case was not the answer. And it also
Yeah.
tied in perfectly the relationship with her husband, because in these other universes, or even in her own universe, she's seeing is like it was the specific example was with Deirdre, the IRS agent, Jamie Lee Curtis, where she was kind of being confrontational and she was running around and trying to like take things head on, and it wasn't working. But her husband, Wayman, he was who she saw, I think, is kind of weak. It's kind of like, oh, he's
Hmm.
not exciting. He's like, but he would like talk to Deirdre and just like calmly, and like he'd bring her cookies and he'd be nice to her. And it's like, oh, it's like, oh, we need, because like the whole thing was in that one universe where they were having the party. She's like, they had given her to the end of the day, get your papers to us so we
Yeah.
can go through and finish this audit. But she comes in with the police, is like, you didn't come with the papers. Like, this was serious. We're seizing this property now.
Hmm.
Um, but then Wayman is able to talk to her and get a week extension to get the papers in. And she's like, how did you do that? She's like, I just talked
I
to
really
her.
like that. Yeah, I really like that. Say, what did you say to her? I just talked to her. It was
Yeah.
just like two people having a
And
conversation.
then in that other universe where, like the main universe that we were following most of our action in, Wayman is like, after all these, the whole movie worth of fighting and martial arts and guns and all this violence, it's like, why are we doing, can we not just settle this? Like, why can't we just be kind to each other? And at that
Yeah.
final fight, like Wayman, so like it's coming together with like this relationship between her and her husband, right? It's kind of completing that arc as well, but also in terms of like simultaneously having this message of, finding different ways to solve conflicts that we don't use violence, because violence is
Yeah.
self-perpetuating. And he's like, no, use kindness, Evelyn. And so she uses kindness. So instead of beating the ever-loving snot out of these goons, which she's proven that she can do, even with her
Yeah.
pinky finger, with that whole pinky finger fight where she was beating up goons with using just her pinky and like shooting them up in the air
wild.
and stuff. Amazing. We'll talk about the fights after this, because we got to talk about some of the unique fights in here.
Oh, okay.
But she's like, essentially she would go like, she would be up in them, and she could like, at that point she was like a multi-universal being, like her daughter, where she could like pass to different universes. Like she could, as she touched these people, like she would just touch their head and she could see all the different paths that they'd chosen and their
Mhm.
different kind of like their multiverse map. And she saw, oh, this person is hurting because of this. And so instead of like punching them in the face, she kind of pulled in as like, oh, this person just wanted a puppy or something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
The one guy was just like, the BDSM guy just wanted to be
You
spanked.
just want to be spanked. Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, puts the ball gag in him and is like, spanks him. And he's like, oh, he's happy all of a sudden. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like how she defeats the goons at the end is by listening to what they actually need and then helping them get what they need. It was like this metaphor is like entering into dialogue with people, actually listening to them, and then helping them, working with them towards a common goal. And it was like, that's such a refreshing and cathartic kind of message that the path forward isn't through violence. The path to conflict resolution is through opening yourself to putting yourself in other people's shoes, seeing things from their perspective and trying to understand things from their perspective, and actually listening, and then working forward on a path together, instead of punching or shooting each other. And it was so profound, philosophically, but also it was so perfect in her finally seeing, oh, her husband is strong in a different way, right? That
Yep.
kindness, that being kind is not a weakness, it's a strength. And that
Mhm.
people fight, quote unquote, fight in different ways, right? That everybody has their own ways of approaching the world. And that sometimes, sure, if somebody's coming up to you and they're about to punch you in the face or hit you with a fanny pack. Sure, you need to defend yourself, but but if you don't have to use violence, like there are better ways to solving problems than violence, right? Violence is a last resort. And yeah, that was great to see that her husband was kind of validated in that, and that it was kindness and understanding that won the day, and not who had the bigger gun or who could blow up the most buildings.
So you want to talk about some of the fights in here, and the fights
going against exactly what we just talked about,
right?
Talking about how awesome the fights were.
Yeah. And it's like the first, and that's the thing, that's the beauty of part of the movie, is that the first hour of the movie is kind of all fighting. It's all, I mean, it's there to kind of pull you in, and there's a lot of humor going on. There's a lot of humor in the fights. The fights are done in innovative ways. There's a lot of interesting things happening on screen, and the way they meld like the multiverse, like the different consciousnesses together is really interesting. Like, what are some of the fights that stood out for you?
Let's go through them by the numbers here. So the first big set piece battle, I think, is the Kiwei Kwan, Waymond Wang, Evelyn's husband. He takes on a bunch of security guards at the IRS, but he uses his fanny pack. He takes his fanny pack off, and he uses that in a really cool way. I also got a shout out. I didn't realize this. I looked it up afterwards. But Kiwei Kwan, he played Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
He's been retired from acting for like 20 some odd years, 28 years or something.
Oh, really?
And he came back for this role. I mean, that's how significant this piece is.
But I was like, oh my God, a completely different aside here, completely different tangent before I get back into Everything Everywhere All at Once. When Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out, I don't hate this movie. It's not my favorite Indiana Jones movie, but my thought was, if they were going to continue on that franchise, instead of having Indiana Jones' long lost son just come out of nowhere, have Short Round be the next person to carry that torch, because you have that pre-existing relationship. And seeing what Kiwei Kwan did in this movie, he should have been. They should have gone up to his house with a dump truck full of money and said, Can you please come back and take over the Indiana Jones franchise?
Well, that's the thing. Like, if he hasn't, and I haven't looked at his filmography, but if he hasn't acted since he was a child, it'd be really difficult to tell if he's still a really competent actor, right? And yeah, if he's not really willing to come back for something like that, maybe they explored it, maybe they didn't. You guarantee they didn't, because it's all Shia LaBeouf hour and the Indiana Jones 4. But him coming back here proves he's a very good actor.
And like, I gotta look it up. It looked like him doing all the martial arts stuff too, right? Because I remember, like, in Indiana Jones and in Goonies, he played, was it Data? But he was there as well. But he was, as a kid in those movies, he was using martial arts. And this one too is like crazy stuff. It didn't look like a stunt guy. It looked like he was. Yeah. It was him doing it. It was pretty amazing. I thought it was Jackie Chan at first. Like the way he looked, sometimes it looked like Jackie Chan almost. The way it was filmed it was almost filmed more like an Asian style martial arts film, where you could actually, like, you were following the action a lot more than you could in a lot of the bigger budget movies now. Like, there's none of that stupid shaky cam stuff. There weren't like it didn't take 7 cuts to throw a punch. You could actually see the action and follow what was going on, but like really inventive, using that fanny pack, like as a whip almost, or like he took some rocks from an aquarium at one point and put them in the fanny pack and used it as a weapon. And like there were a couple really hard hits where like he caught the one guy in the face with like the clip, I think it was his nose, and pulled him down. And just the way that went like face first into the ground is like, I wonder whether that was a stunt person or whether that was like CGI or something, because that looked like it really could have broken somebody's neck. Like it was pretty nuts.
Yeah, the hits were hard. I imagine the stunt work was top notch. The fighting was really good, and Michelle Yeoh does have a solid kung fu background as well, right? Like a martial arts background.
Well, Michelle Yeoh, apparently she's like a martial arts, like, I don't know, like master. Like she's got to have like black belts in multiple martial arts, right? Like.
Yeah, because in that alternate universe where she goes on to be a famous movie star for martial arts is a lot of footage and stuff like taken from her red carpet appearances on real world movies. I was wondering about that.
Were those like actual clips taken from her like actual like Oscar appearances and stuff? Like,
I think so, because I'm pretty sure I saw a Crazy Rich Asians poster in the background of one of the like red carpet scenes.
But yeah, like, I know there was like a small fight between Evelyn and Deirdre. up front where I think Deirdre was using
Wrestling moves and
wrestling
stuff.
moves, and
Yeah.
then like Evelyn was able to in the nick of time. It's like it was a really cool slow motion shot. It was almost like Matrix style, where like I think
Yeah.
Deirdre's knee was like a centimeter away from Evelyn's face, and before she finally is able to master, like that verse jumping and get those experiences.
Well, it was kind of
skills.
neat that scene for sure, because it kind of reminded me of like Asian martial arts movies with the slow motion. The knee is like an inch away from the face. And then you mentioned the Matrix. It's like she just jacked in and gained all that knowledge in an instant, just like she's been jacked into the Matrix, and she can do kung fu.
I know kung fu. But it was great too. Like all of the weird things they had to do to change their trajectory to get to the consciousness. Like that one that's like the team from the Alpha universe is like, tell Deirdre that you love her, and that's going to be the trigger. The one trigger that Waymond uses, like he eats a thing of chapstick.
Yeah.
So we're like, why is he doing that? But it's like to trigger because he needs to get somebody with martial arts experience. What are some other, like we talked about the paper cut thing. The other big fight was when Joy shows up, the multiversal omniscient Joy, and she has that fight with the security guards, where she's kind of like hopping through different multiversal versions of herself, and she actually like she takes the security guards and like creates multiversal versions of themselves as well, right? Like the one guy, I think his head just explodes into a bunch of confetti.
Yeah.
The other guy, like he ends up dressed in like this like in a skirt and like the fruit hat. And she pile drives him and like it looks like it breaks his neck. Like that's pretty brutal. And then one point it's like, she gets shot. And it's like, oh, don't worry, it's organic. And it's like it's a bottle of ketchup. And she just but then she turns around, and I never thought I'd see this, but there's a giant like dildo fight where she pulls out two dildos and she beats this guy to death. It was just like really bizarre stuff. But that actor, Stephanie Shu, just like her portrayal there again, I gotta hand it to her. Like it was really, really cool. Just her portrayal, like how she was like so nihilistic and just like really didn't care about anything or anybody, right? What was the other big fights? I think we talked about like the Pinkie fights where she was fighting some of the Alpha Universe's goons, and using only her pinkies. But like when she hit them, they would go flying across the room. Or like she threw the one guy with her pinky like 10, 15 feet in the air, and then slammed it in the ground just using her pinky finger. And it was funny too, like in the one, there was another fight too where she called on a singer version of herself for increased lung capacity because they had shot some like tear gas in there.
That was very cool.
And then she took like the one with like she was in another universe. She was just like standing outside of the a pizza place, like spinning the sign around. One of those people. So she took that and used like the SWAT team shields and used those sign swinging abilities. One she used like she tapped into herself as a chef because she was really good with the knives, and she was using that as a
teppanyaki chef.
Yeah. But there was one fight between a couple of goons, and I guess in order for them to get to the path they needed to shove this trophy up their
this
butt.
is funny because it was set up kind of earlier in the movie. Jamie Lee Curtis's IRS agent has a couple of these trophies. They're almost like Employee of the Month awards, and they're shaped like anal toys, basically. And you're like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And then later on, their path to this other consciousness, this other universe, is to put this up their butt, of course. And it's basically a battle to get to the to the trophy to put up their butts. And then both of them manage to stick two different items up their butt, and then have
there's two goons with two things up their butt, and you can see them clearly throughout the whole fight with these trophies,
and things are blurred out enough that we don't have to be subjected to
It was kind of cool though too, because like everybody had their moment of one person like Waymond would like jack into or like verse jump into somebody else with experiences, and he would have a big kung fu battle, and like everyone was like, oh my, how did you do that? That's crazy. And then like Evelyn would do the same thing, and Waymond was like, "Oh man, how'd you do that? That was pretty." Everyone had those moments. It's like, "How did you do that?" Like it was pretty neat how everyone had their little moments in there. And then like when the Alpha Universe thugs were getting ready, I don't know if you noticed in the background when they were like one person was like singing opera or something, but they were doing like one guy was like xeroxing his butt, but they need to do like
Yeah, yeah.
improbable things to get to their other universe. There's all these little touches going on in the background of these thugs doing weird things. Like one had like little workout like little dumbbells that they were using for something, just to do something improbable to get them down the path they needed to get the skills set. But the one time in one of the fights, it was pretty cool where Evelyn and the one thug, they lost their connections to the other universe, to the knowledge. So they just like they were like doing all these awesome martial arts moves, and they just like got into like a slap fight because they lost their
They have
knowledge,
no
and they're just
skill
like
left.
start slapping each other. Like, yeah. But just like all these really cool, inventive thing, like using what you might not think of as useful skills.
Well, that's where she really, like Evelyn, really elevated beyond everybody else in that they were going after like specific fighting skills. And she was like, well, how can I use this
Yeah.
one random skill like the lung capacity? What was really the sign spinning
Yeah.
was really significant. It's like, oh, we can use the shield as a sign. And it's like for her to think so quickly on her feet to go find a universe that that has that ability was really neat because there's only so many universes that are going to have martial arts experts in it, right? And they all seem to jack into that one universe.
Well, yeah, I love how the Alpha Waymond, or Alpha Universe Waymond, explains it is like all of your failures, all your disappointments have led to this moment, but it's like because you've kind of like you've failed at everything, you're not
Yeah.
really good at anything, that you're open to the possibility of everything. It's almost like this backhanded compliment. It's a
Yeah,
kind of
it's funny, and it
moment,
plays
but
out,
it's
and
like,
it's set up earlier in the film because she has all these tax receipts for all these hobbies / business
different
ideas
hobbies, right?
that
Yeah.
she wants to get into, but she's basically no good at any of them, so she keeps failing. But that means every time she fails at something, she succeeds perfectly in the other universe. I thought it was really nice.
Yeah, so this Evelyn, the reason she's the hero is because she's this
Yeah.
nexus point of failure, but because she's not, it's like, yeah, she's not very good at anything, but that opens up the possibility that she could be,
Yeah.
to everything else. She could be good at everything, right? So it was kind of this, it worked, like it was a
Yeah.
neat kind of way to kind of explain like how this Evelyn, who didn't seem special, because there's all these other Evelyns who were like
Yeah.
martial arts masters or like these amazing chefs or like opera singers or movie stars. Like, why was this Evelyn special? It's like, and she even says like, I'm not the Evelyn you're looking for. I'm not special at all. It's kind of the whole point is that you weren't special,
Yeah.
and that makes you special. It's a weird kind of paradox, right?
Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we head into ratings on this film?
I think we do need to talk about, I think we mentioned a couple actors. Michelle Yeoh, I think, is finally getting, she's been in a ton of stuff. I remember her from like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. I think there's a 4K version floating around there. I gotta go buy that now. But yeah, I think she was in one of the James Bond movies.
Yep. Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah, she was in like in a lot of stuff. I didn't really realize
She was in the third Mummy movie, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Apparently,
she was.
I'm just looking at her filmography here. She was in Boss Level, which I think we both watched somewhat recently.
Yes, and she was in one Children of Huangxi, I think it's pronounced. I have the movie on my shelf. It's a nice little movie. Check it out sometime. She's been in tons of stuff, and I think there's a lot of talk from people online. I don't know if it's going to translate into anything, but people are saying online, like, this is her moment. Like, if like she should be up for all the awards, and just like with her performance in this, and it was an amazing performance by Michelle Yeoh. She did a phenomenal job. She's always been a great actor / martial artist, and so I think she's blended that into a lot of her roles. So to finally see her kind of getting her due, because I don't know if she's been necessarily, even though she's been in some of these well-known movies, like I don't hear her talked a lot about, and I don't know if, talking to the average moviegoer, that they would necessarily have known who she was. So to finally see her getting recognition, I think we talked about Ki Wei Kwan, Short Round, back in action. I really, really hope we get to see more of him in more movies going forward. It was just, he did an amazing performance, and you could see like the range when he was in that one universe where he and Evelyn didn't get married, and he looked completely different, because like he was made out to be this kind of like mousy kind of guy, and he's like, no, he looked like a slick like businessman in the other universe. Like this, yeah, it was like he had range, and he doing the martial arts stuff too. It was great to see him back in action. Jamie Lee Curtis, great as always. It's kind of refreshing to see. It's always refreshing to see these actors where it's not as much of an ego thing, where like they don't have to. She was not made up to look especially
Yes. Yeah.
flattering as the character, but like it was. I think you get a sense in a lot of these movies where sometimes the actors have a bigger ego and they have to be portrayed in a certain way and maintain a certain image, and to see that Jamie Lee Curtis was like, she was dedicated to playing the role. Is like it was great to. It's always great to see Jamie Lee Curtis and stuff. I think I talked several times about Stephanie Hsu
Mm-hmm.
as Joy, and I was looking at her credits. She was credited as Sue in Shang-Chi. I'm not sure what character
And you
that is.
failed to talk about James Hong this whole time, the grandfather in the movie.
Yeah, I was actually literally going to mention him next, but hoping that Stephanie gets some more movie roles because I've seen she's done mostly TV and short films. But yes, James Hong, as I think his name is Gong Gong in this one. I think it was
Yeah.
he was the grandfather. He was, for me, as soon as I saw him show up, I was like, yeah, David Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China. He's had an incredible career going back decades. Like I don't know how.
Well, this guy's been in like over 150 movies. He's relentlessly on the screen. He's in everything, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad to see too now that this movie's getting recognition. That hopefully James Hong is going to get more recognition as well. He's one of those actors I think that people they've definitely, if you watched movies in the past 40 years, you've seen him in a movie.
Well,
Guaranteed.
This guy was in Godzilla from the 50s, so like he's been around for a while.
If you watched movies in the past 70 years, you've seen this guy in movies.
He was born in 1929.
But yeah, James Hong, again, great as the grandfather. He has, I think we touched on a couple of his character moments, but there's also, he gets his moments too where he's taken over by the Alpha Universe version of himself. So even though he's not jumping a whole lot, he does get to play, and he's in a wheelchair in some of these universes, and it's kind of cool at the end, in the end battle where he all of a sudden you turn around and like his wheelchair is turned into this cybernetic kind of battle suit of armor around him. It's kind of neat. I was gonna say James Hong, man, the whole cast is just, it's great, and I think we needed to give props because would this movie have worked with other actors? Probably, but I think there was lightning in a bottle. I definitely think with this script,
for sure,
these directors and the story, and these actors telling specifically, that I think you could tell the chemistry between the actors there. Something you can't fake, or you can only fake to a certain extent, I guess. And they just, they knocked it out of the park. And I hope that the Academy or whoever runs whatever other awards, I really hope that these people get the recognition they deserve, because it's just a phenomenal job all around.
So with all that being said, what kind of star rating are you giving this movie? And for that continued context, I mean, we rate it, as per the Letterboxd standards. There's possible 5 stars with a special heart on top of that, if you so please.
That extra, as the French say, I don't know what. So for me, this was an easy 5 out of 5.
Wow.
And I'm on the verge of potentially even giving it the heart, the extra like for something special. This movie, I tried to temper my expectations, but I went in with really high expectations. I try not to do this because almost invariably I'm disappointed. Statistically speaking, you're going to be disappointed if you have really high expectations. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once completely not only met my expectations, but exceeded them. It felt really, like I said, like this was really something special. This was really lightning in a bottle. It's one of those movies that only comes around every once in a while. And really between Everything, Everywhere, All at Once and The Northman, which I also watched recently, I felt like those two movies were the first movies in 2022 where I watched and like, I'm watching films now, right? It wasn't just like big budget blockbusters or something to pass the time. I'm watching artists create art. With something, I was watching something profound, right? I think this Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Northman are 2 movies to watch out for, but definitely Everything Everywhere All at Once. See this movie as soon as you can, as many times as you can. Support this movie as much as you can. I want to see more content like this from in general and from these creators as
Definitely.
well.
Well said.
How about you, Brian? How do you rate this movie?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by your 5-star rating. I don't feel like in our time doing this podcast, we've really landed on the immediate out the gate 5 stars. And it's not something that I venture into very often either. Only a handful of movies get a 5-star rating from me on first viewing. And this movie kind of took me by surprise because you did say it. Expectations were high. I mean, it was impossible to avoid all the hype over the past few months. And then I watched this movie and it's like, that blew me away. That blew away my expectations. They were that high, and the movie surprised me. So this was an easy 5-star. Usually I'll sleep on a movie. Like I'll just watch it. The next day I'll go and rate it. No. Before the credits end rolling on this one, I'm rating it in the app 5 stars all the way through. I 100% never give this to movies that I watch for the first time. It usually takes a couple viewings to get the like, but I could see that happening. Are you going to pick this movie up on physical media? Is it going to join that mighty shelf of yours in the back?
Yeah, 100%. As soon as this comes out, and I hope it's definitely going to get a Blu-ray release. I would hope for a 4K, but I know that usually smaller releases like this don't necessarily get the 4K treatment. I hope it gets the 4K treatment. But either way, this is going in my collection as soon as it comes out in physical media.
Yep. And I think you sort of alluded to it there. You said it, and I'll say it here. This is a type of movie that I watch and reaffirms my love for cinema. This is really fantastic. That's a wrap on another episode of the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.